I was still in my nightgown when my daughter pressed the blue folder into my hands and said, "Sign the deed transfer today, Mom. Or the realtor lists 112 Ocean Crest Drive without you, and you'll walk away with nothing." Her voice did not tremble. The morning did. Wind came off the Atlantic and rattled the porch chimes like warning bells, and the lemon tea cooling in my cup tasted suddenly metallic, like I had bitten my own tongue. Angela stood very straight in the doorway, hair pulled into a sleek knot that used to be a ponytail I tied before first grade, and behind her, a thin slice of ocean flashed between the railings. She pushed a pen toward me the way a stranger pushes a form at a DMV window, and I felt my heart fumble in my chest, slow and uncertain. "It's all here," she said. "It's time." The folder smelled faintly of printer ink and something new, chemical and impatient. Inside, the pages wore my name in clean black type, Antonia Brooks, and next to it the parcel number of the house Robert and I bought in 1978 when our hair was darker and our knees did not ache on cool mornings. Lot 19, Block C, with a stubborn live oak that drops leaves year-round and a fence that leans just enough to look tired. Beneath the legal words were neat lines for signatures, mine and hers, dates and initials, the places where identity becomes ink. She had tucked a second stack beneath the first, the title to my old Buick, the silver one with the dent on the rear fender from the summer. A neighbor boy backed into it and promised to mow my lawn in apology. Angela's finger tapped each flag like a metronome. Here, here, and here. I could hear the refrigerator motor hum and the slow tick of the kitchen clock. 8:13 a.m. The steam from the kettle was still ribboning the air. "Since when is there a realtor?" I asked. But she did not answer, or maybe she did, and I could not hear past the high ringing that started in my ears. A gull cut across the deck, a white knife against blue, and the smell of salt pulled the memory of Robert to the surface, his laugh in this kitchen, his bus driver's jacket slung over the back of that very chair. The one with the loose rung I keep meaning to fix. He used to tell me that a home should sound like itself. The house did, whined in the vents, chimes, clock, the faint slap of water against pilings. But my daughter's voice did not belong to our house. "Mom, the market is perfect," she said, measured, brisk. "We can get 750, maybe 8. You don't need stairs and maintenance and storm shutters. Europe is cheaper. Edward's firm has a plan. We can keep you in comfort without stress." Her smile was bright and professional, like a staged house. "This is for your own good." I took a breath and tasted citrus and fear. "For my good," I repeated, and tried to arrange the words so they would make sense. When she was 10, Angela slipped her small hand into mine during hurricanes, and we counted between thunder and lightning. Back then, she believed I was the safest place in the world. Now she held the pen like a slender spear. "It's not complicated," she said. "Sign now, and the closing is Friday. If we wait, taxes will hit. We can't have that." "Taxes," I said, and the word felt like the wrong code in July. My thumb traced the raised seam of the paper. There, under the barcode, was a number I recognized from envelopes I used to file for Robert when he went to the bank on Saturdays. His handwriting would curl with little flourishes, more art than ledger. He never liked straight lines. I swallowed and looked at my daughter's face for a softness, a crack, an old habit of kindness. I found mascara without smudge, lipstick the exact color of ripened cherries, a faint impatience tightening the corners of her eyes. "Angela," I said, because I needed to hear her name in my own mouth. "This house is brick and wood and problems," she cut in. "You're 71. Be reasonable. Do you want to fall on those stairs?" Her gaze flicked toward the hallway as if the steps might leap at me like a predator. "Sign the papers, and I promise you'll never worry about a hurricane season again." Behind her, the ocean lifted in a long, steady breath. A blue runner on the table caught the light and made a strip of sky on wood. My fingers cooled. I remembered Robert coming home with his jacket smelling of diesel and winter air, pressing his cheek to mine and whispering that good decisions are quiet ones, the kind you feel in your bones. My bones felt cold. Angela set the pen down and slid the deed to the edge of the table, close as a dare. "Mom, I need an answer. Now, if you don't sign today, the offer expires at 5 p.m. and we lose everything we've built. I can't let that happen. Everything we've built." The phrase landed hard, as if the years we layered into this place had been bricks in her pockets, as if she had carried them farther than I had. I looked past her shoulder to the porch rail where the paint chips away, and I always say I'll touch it up and then I don't, because it is the kind of imperfection that proves a life has been lived. I could feel the shape of the pen through the table like a pulse. The air had the thin, almost metallic brightness of a coming storm. "What happens if I don't?" I asked, finally, softly. She did not blink. "Then you will be responsible for the loss. You will have made the choice to ruin us." She leaned closer, lowered her voice to something that did not carry, something meant to live and die in my kitchen. "And I will not forgive you for that." The house went quiet in the most dangerous way. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. My name was printed 3 times on the top page, and each looked like a stranger wearing my clothes. I could feel the edge of a tear, hot and traitorous. My hand hovered over the line where I was supposed to surrender, and the chimes struck once, twice, a thin, bright sound that felt like glass. I did not know yet where the truth began or ended, only that my daughter's eyes had become a mirror that did not recognize me. The pen lay between us like a small, gleaming knife. Did I raise this voice that could cut me so cleanly, or had I simply never noticed how sharp it had grown? The morning after Angela's visit, the house felt different, as if her voice had seeped into the walls overnight. Even the sea sounded further away. I tried to make breakfast oatmeal, the same way Robert liked it, a spoon of brown sugar and half a banana, but the kettle whistled too sharply, and the smell of scorched milk clung to the air. The spoon slipped from my hand and struck the counter with a soft metallic cry. Everything echoed. I used to think this house breathed with us. When Robert was alive, it hummed a gentle rhythm of footsteps, radio static, the clatter of mugs, the late-night shuffle of him reheating leftovers after a long bus route. He drove Route 14 down to the marina, wore the same navy jacket every day until the elbows went shiny. He'd come home smelling of gasoline and cold air, and I'd tease him about being the only man who could look handsome covered in city dust. The house would exhale when he laughed. After he passed, the silence grew loud but not cruel. It was a companion. I learned its language. The sigh of wood in winter, the whisper of waves through open windows, the steady tap of branches when the tide rolled high. For 23 years it held me like an old friend. Until yesterday. Now that silence accused me. It asked questions. Why didn't you read before you signed? Why didn't you ask what the rush was? I rinsed the mug and watched the swirl of coffee dregs vanish down the drain. My reflection trembled in the stainless steel sink, a woman with soft gray hair and eyes swollen from not sleeping. Angela had called late that night. "Mom, I'll come by next week to finish the paperwork," she said briskly. "Don't worry, everything's fine." Her tone was the same one realtors use when the roof leaks, but they call it cha. I wanted to ask her to come by just to talk, maybe watch the old movies Robert recorded on VHS, but she had already. Around noon, I walked down to the beach. The sky was the color of unpolished pewter, and the air carried that metallic salt that burns slightly when you breathe too deep. A few children chased gulls near the surf, their laughter floating like bubbles that never reached me. The tide had left ribbons of seaweed and crushed shells along the sand. I stood where the water touched my shoes and remembered the first day we saw this property, Robert holding the realtor's pamphlet, his eyes bright like a boy's. "One day," he'd said, "we'll watch the sunsets here and argue about nothing at all. We did that for years. Now even our arguments felt precious." When I turned back, I saw the house on the hill. White shingles, blue shutters, chimney slightly leaning. A gull circled once above it, a pale sentinel. I thought of Angela as a little girl sitting on that same porch, her knees scraped, clutching a seashell like it was treasure. She used to say she'd live next door to me forever. Children promise forever so easily. Back inside, I opened the drawer by the phone and found a stack of old letters. Robert's handwriting danced across the envelopes, looped and careful. Bills, receipts, the warranty for the washing machine, and beneath them, a postcard from Angela's honeymoon 10 years ago. "Paris is everything I dreamed, Mom. Edward is perfect. Love, A." I traced the tower printed on it, faded now to a gray smudge. I tried to remember the sound of her laughter before it hardened into that clipped tone she uses with clients. That afternoon, Mrs. Nolan, my neighbor, stopped by with her terrier. "I heard Angela's selling dear," she said, eyes too curious. "Big move, Europe, isn't it?" I smiled thinly. "Just exploring options." She patted my arm. "Change is good at our age." Our age. I closed the door and leaned against it until the latch clicked twice. The kettle began its second cry of the day. I didn't move to silence it. As dusk fell, light slanted across the dining room table where the folders still lay. I hadn't touched it since yesterday. Dust caught in the sunlight, dancing lazily over the embossed letters, "Property Transfer Agreement." The pages looked harmless, almost beautiful in the amber glow. I sat down, my fingers hovering just above them. Outside, the ocean glimmered in stripes of silver and gray. I thought of Robert again, how he once said not to rush trust. Even a handshake needs a heartbeat, he'd joke. Maybe that's why he never trusted electronic banking. He liked paper, ink, signatures that meant something. I folded the folder shut and slid it into the drawer under the phone, the same drawer where his letters slept. A small act of defiance, maybe. But as night settled and the wind picked up, I realized something was shifting not just in my daughter but in me. I could feel the edge of a storm forming somewhere I couldn't yet see, a weight in the air that smelled of salt and rain and change. I looked out toward the dark water and whispered to the empty room, "Robert, what have we done wrong with her?" The only answer was the sound of waves breaking steady, inevitable, and far stronger than I ever imagined. 3 days later, Angela arrived again. She didn't call first. I heard her car before I saw it, the smooth purr of a newer engine rolling over the gravel driveway Robert once leveled himself. She used to drive that old Corolla the first gave her for college, the one that stalled whenever the air conditioner ran. Now it was a black Lexus, quiet and confident, like its owner. When she stepped out, she wore cream slacks and a silk blouse, the color of champagne, too fine for the salt air. A faint perfume trailed behind her, sharp and floral, out of place among the smell of seaweed and sand. She didn't look like my daughter walking up those porch steps. She looked like a woman who had come to close a deal. "Mom, you didn't answer my messages," she said, brushing her hair back. Her nails gleamed pale pink, manicured, businesslike. "I thought you might be avoiding this conversation." "I wasn't avoiding you," I said softly. "I just needed to think." She sighed, the kind of sigh that carries years of unspoken impatience. "Think about what? It's a simple sale. The market is hot, and Edward's friend already has buyers lined up. You'll have more than enough to live comfortably." I led her inside. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. Robert's framed photo sat above the fireplace, his smile captured on the day of our 30th anniversary, lines at the corners of his eyes deep from laughter. Angela avoided looking at it. She sat on the couch, crossing her legs neatly. "Mom, I know it's emotional. I get that. But this house is old. It's expensive to maintain. You said the roof leaks again, right? Let me handle this for you. Edward and I can reinvest the money. You'll get monthly returns. You'll finally relax." Her words were smooth, rehearsed. I could hear the echo of Edward behind them, the corporate tone that strips warmth from language. I smiled faintly, because I knew persuasion when I heard it. "Relax," I repeated. "When was the last time I didn't?" She gave a small laugh, the polite kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You know what I mean." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Mom, I'm not doing this for me. You've done so much your whole life. You deserve a break. You could move closer to us in New York. Imagine holidays together, dinners every weekend. I'd come by all the time." I looked at her hands resting on her knee. I remembered those same hands, smaller once, sticky with jam from peanut butter sandwiches. "You've built a good life there," I said. "I don't want to be in the way." "You wouldn't be," she smiled quickly. "Edward even said he could help manage your accounts. He's great with numbers. It's what he does." I heard something behind the words, an eagerness that didn't sound like generosity. Still, I nodded. I wanted to believe she was thinking of me. It's hard to stop believing your child means well, even when the signs say otherwise. The clock in the kitchen ticked loud enough to count each second of hesitation. Angela filled the silence with movement-straightening magazines, folding a throw blanket, opening the blinds wider. "You've always hated paperwork," she said lightly. "Let me take care of the details. You just need to sign when the notary comes." "Angela," I said, and she paused. "Why does it have to be so soon?" Her eyes flashed before she smiled again, smooth as polished glass. "Because good offers don't wait, Mom. You taught me that yourself. Remember when Dad almost lost the house because he hesitated on that first mortgage?" I almost laughed. He didn't hesitate, he thought. Same thing. No, I said quietly. It's not. Something flickered in her expression, a brief crack, maybe guilt, maybe annoyance, but she smoothed it over quickly. Mom, please, we're doing this for your peace of mind. You've worked hard your entire life. Let me take care of you now. Her words should have felt comforting. Instead, they stung. Let me take care of you. I thought of the way she said take as if care was something that could be possessed. Outside, the wind shifted. Curtains swelled inward, brushing the old armchair where Robert used to sit and read. Angela stood and began pacing near the window. I know this house holds memories, she said, but memories don't pay bills. Don't you want to travel a little? Maybe Italy? You could finally see Florence like you always dreamed. I smiled. I used to dream of Florence when your father was alive. Not anymore. Then what do you want? She asked. Her tone was genuine for a breath, almost pleading. I want you to be happy, I said. She blinked, caught off guard. That's sweet, Mom, but I'm fine. I studied her face. The sharp lines time hadn't softened. You don't sound fine. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Angela turned away, pretending to admire the view. I have to go, she said finally. Edward's waiting on a call. Think about what I said. Don't let fear hold you back. When the door closed behind her, the house released a breath it had been holding. I stood by the window and watched her drive off, the gravel crackling under her tires. I wanted to believe that she was just misguided, that beneath the polish and calculation, the daughter I knew was still there somewhere, waiting to remember the woman who taught her to tie her shoes and spell her name. But as her car disappeared beyond the dunes, a faint unease stayed behind like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. And for the first time, I wondered if love, left unchecked, could turn into something that dangerous. It was a Tuesday when Angela came again. The kind of late afternoon where the light turned the ocean, the color of pewter, and the air carried that smell of salt mixed with something damp, like the world holding its breath. I was folding laundry when I heard her knock 3 sharp raps, not the soft rhythmic pattern she used as a child. I already knew somehow that she wasn't here for tea. When I opened the door, she was holding a briefcase instead of a purse. Hi, Mom, she said quickly, stepping inside before I could answer. I just came from Edward's office. We finally have everything ready. Everything ready. Those 2 words made my stomach tighten. She set the briefcase on the dining table and clicked it open. I caught a whiff of leather polish and toner, a sterile smell that didn't belong in my home. Inside was a thick folder, neatly tabbed, full of pages I didn't understand, numbers, seals, stamps. I know you hate this stuff, she said, smiling as if to soothe me. That's why I simplified it. Just your signature here, here, and on the vehicle title. She laid the papers out with the precision of someone arranging weapons. I noticed the notary's section already filled in, except for my name. You had this notarized? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. Pre-signed by our legal representative, she said easily. It just saves time. Trust me, Mom, it's all standard. Her tone carried that breezy confidence I once envied. But under it, I heard something mechanical rehearsed. I looked at the first page. My name appeared in sharp black ink. Transferor, Antonia M. Brooks. Then below, transferee, Angela E. Sinclair. Sinclair her married name. The address of the property followed, then the words that sank like a stone. Complete transfer of ownership and associated assets. The pen she handed me was heavy, gold, engraved with her initials. It felt cold in my hand. Angela, I began carefully, why is your name under transferee? She didn't blink. Because it's easier that way, Mom. If the buyers back out, we can relist faster. You don't need to worry about the logistics. My throat tightened. So you'd own the house. Temporarily, she said too quickly. Mom, please, don't make this difficult. Her words struck a tender nerve. How many times had I said that to her when she was little? Don't make this difficult, sweetheart. Trust me. I remembered brushing her hair before church, her eyes rolling but her small body leaning into my hands anyway. Now she stood across from me, arms crossed, waiting. Edward says the market could dip any week now, she added, glancing at her watch. You'll regret it if we lose the offer, and you know we could use the money to secure your future. My future, I echoed. And yours. She smiled, but the warmth didn't reach her voice. We're family, Mom. There's no yours and mine. I looked at her, trying to find the girl who once drew hearts in chalk on this very floor. Instead, I saw a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The light outside dimmed. Clouds slid over the Sunday. I could hear the slow, rhythmic roar of the sea beyond the porch. It reminded me of the nights Robert and I would sit with the window open, listening. He used to say the tide was proof that even loss comes back eventually. I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. Angela's phone buzzed. "Edward's waiting," she said, impatient now. "Mom, please, just sign. I've already done the hard part. All you have to do is trust me." She slid the papers closer. The pages brushed my wrist. The touch felt like static. I glanced at the line meant for my signature. Beneath it, small print I could barely read. "The undersigned hereby relinquishes all rights, title, and interest in the property known as 112 Ocean Crest Drive, effective immediately upon execution." I felt my breath hitch. "Angela?" I said again, this time softer, almost pleading. "Do you even know what you're asking me to give up?" She met my gaze without flinching. "A building, Mom, wood and walls. You'll still have me." But I already knew that wasn't true. I sat there for a long moment, the pen heavy between my fingers. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that something was wrong. But another voice, the mother's voice, said, "Don't upset her. She's your child. She must know better." So I signed. Once. Twice. Then the third time, my hand trembled so badly the ink bled at the edges of my name. Angela exhaled in relief, gathering the papers quickly before I could change my mind. "Perfect," she said, snapping the folder shut. "You'll thank me later." When the door closed behind her, I sat at the table, staring at the dent her briefcase had left on the wood. The smell of ink still lingered, sharp and chemical, like a warning I'd ignored. Outside, the sea rolled and hissed against the shore. I could almost hear Robert's voice in the rhythm of the waves. "Always read before you sign, Annie." He used to call me that, Annie. Nobody had since he died. I pressed my hand over the place where I'd written my name and felt it pulse beneath my palm, as if the signature had taken a piece of me with it. The room darkened, though the lamps were on. Or maybe it was just my eyes clouding over. I didn't know it yet, but that day would divide my life cleanly in two, before the pen touched paper and after. It was raining the morning she left. A thin, misting kind of rain that makes everything look softer than it really is. The driveway shimmered like liquid glass, and the ocean beyond the dunes was a muted gray, heaving slowly under a sheet of fog. I stood by the window with my robe tied loosely at the waist, watching Angela and Edward load their suitcases into the back of the Lexus. The car's trunk opened and closed like a mouth swallowing secrets. She hadn't told me they were leaving that day. I'd woken to the sound of wheels bumping over the gravel, the muted voices of two people trying not to wake someone else. I came to the door just as she was folding her umbrella. "Mom," she said, startled, forcing a smile that didn't fit her face. "You're up early." "I could say the same," I replied. The air between us smelled of wet asphalt and her perfume sharp, cold lilac that didn't belong to this weather. "Where are you going?" "Just a short trip," she said too quickly. "Edward has an opportunity in Europe, a client we can't miss." Edward came around the car, his expensive shoes splashed with mud. "Morning, Mrs. Brooks," he said, polite and hollow. "Don't worry, we'll be back before you know it." He kissed Angela on the temple, already half turned toward the driver's seat. I stepped forward, gripping the porch railing for balance. "You're leaving today? Without telling me?" Angela avoided my eyes. "I was going to call from the airport, Mom. It all happened fast. You know how these business things go." "Business things." She said it like a mantra that excused anything lies, distance, convenience. "And the sale?" I asked quietly. "Is it finished?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, rain glistening on her ring. "Yes, all processed. The buyers are thrilled. You don't have to worry about a thing." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. "Angela, what exactly did I sign?" Her lips parted, then closed again. "Mom," she said softly, "you're overthinking it. You're taken care of. Trust me." The words should have comforted me. Instead, they settled like stones in my stomach. Edward honked the horn once. "We need to go, Ang," he called. She nodded, then turned back to me. "I'll call when we land. Promise." She leaned forward to kiss my cheek. Her lips were warm, but the gesture felt like goodbye. Angela, I whispered before she could step away. Be careful. I always am, she said, smiling with that new polished confidence that wasn't hers, and then she was gone, heels clicking down the steps, umbrella snapping open, car door closing. The Lexus reversed down the drive, tires throwing a fan of water into the air. I stood there long after the sound faded, the rain soaking into my slippers, until only the rhythmic crash of the tide filled the silence. When I went inside, the kitchen clock read 9:42 a.m. The house smelled faintly of her perfume and wet paper. On the table, a small stack of mail waited, nothing unusual. Bills, catalogs, one thin envelope from a law office in town. I almost threw it aside, but something about the neat blue ink of my name on the front stopped me. I slid it open with the butter knife, still damp from breakfast. Inside was a single page. Dear Mrs. Brooks, this is to confirm the transfer of ownership for property 112 Ocean Crest Drive to Miss Angela E. Sinclair, completed and recorded as of March 14. The remaining balance of $742,000 has been wired to the designated account. There was a number listed below that account, one I didn't recognize. I read it again, slower this time, the words blurring at the edges. Transfer of ownership, designated account. The envelope slipped from my fingers. It landed beside the salt shaker, the paper darkening where a droplet from my sleeve fell onto it. The phone was on the wall beside the pantry. I lifted the receiver and dialed Angela's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again, then Edward's office. The secretary said he'd already boarded. The rain grew heavier. Each drop hit the roof like a ticking clock, counting down to something I didn't yet understand. At noon, the phone rang. For a moment, hope surged maybe it was her, but the voice belonged to a man from the bank. Mrs. Brooks, he said, I just wanted to confirm the wire transfer authorization this morning. The account ending in 2194, correct? I don't have an account ending in that, I stammered. A pause. It's listed under Miss Angela Sinclair as joint access. Joint access. The words sliced clean through me. I gripped the counter, feeling the linoleum cool against my palm. I see, I whispered. Thank you for calling. After I hung up, the house went silent again. The kind of silence that feels alive, pulsing. I walked to the living room, where Robert's photo still hung above the fireplace. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Did you know, Robert? I murmured. Did you know she could do this? The picture didn't answer, but the sound of the sea did, steady, unbothered, eternal. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window and watched the last streaks of rain slide down the glass, tasting the metallic bitterness of betrayal in my mouth. My daughter had taken everything I owned, and yet what hurt most wasn't the loss, it was realizing she'd planned it so carefully, so calmly, as if love had nothing to do with it at all. The morning after Angela's departure, the house greeted me with silence so complete it felt like punishment. The refrigerator hummed a steady, indifferent tune, and the gulls outside cried against the wind, but inside these walls, nothing. It was as if the air itself had been stripped of sound. I moved through each room slowly, the way one does in a stranger's home. The living room first, where Robert's chair sat facing the sea, its cushion still bearing the faint imprint of his shape. The blanket Angela gave me last Christmas, still folded neatly over the armrest, smelled faintly of her perfume. I ran my fingers along its edge until the soft fibers burned against my skin. Then the kitchen. The table was bare except for a single mug, mine, half a ring of dried coffee clinging to its rim. I reached for it out of habit, but stopped when I noticed something missing. The folder, the blue one she'd brought, gone. The drawer where I'd kept Robert's letters was ajar, too. Inside, the envelopes were no longer stacked neatly, but shuffled, disturbed. I touched them gently, as if to calm them. I walked to the garage. The air was damp, carrying the smell of salt and oil. The Buick's parking space gaped empty, the concrete stained with its familiar dark rectangle. For a long time I just stood there, staring at the ghost of the car's shadow, trying to make sense of it. Then came the knock at the door. A young man stood on the porch in a raincoat, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Brooks? He asked politely. I'm with Shoreline Realty. We're just taking exterior photos for the new listing. The new listing? I echoed, gripping the doorframe. He flipped through his papers. Yes, ma'am. Property 112 Ocean Crest Drive. Transfer was finalized last week. Congratulations on the sale. I must have gone pale because his smile faltered. Are you all right, ma'am? I nodded slowly, even as the world seemed to tilt around me. I'm fine, I lied. Please, go ahead. He hesitated, then left. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it, the wood cool beneath my skin. My hands trembled. There it was, the confirmation. This wasn't a mistake. It was done. For hours I wandered from room to room like a ghost. Every object whispered her absence. Her childhood photos gone. The seashell wind chime she'd made when she was 10 gone. Even the old china set from my wedding was missing from the cabinet. The house felt plundered, hollowed out by invisible hands. By late afternoon, exhaustion pressed me into Robert's chair. I looked around, seeing not furniture but years. Christmas mornings, burned dinners, nights when we stayed up talking until the dawnlight bled through the curtains. All of it lived here once. Now it felt like a museum of someone else's life. At dusk, Mrs. Nolan stopped by with her little dog. Antonia, dear, I saw a real estate car outside, she said. Are you moving? I swallowed hard. Seems I am, I said softly. Her brows knit together. Oh? You sold to Angela, didn't you? How wonderful, keeping it in the family. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Yes, I said, in the family. When she left, I sank back into the chair, my pulse fluttering unevenly. The sun had dropped below the horizon, and the house grew darker by degrees, swallowing the last traces of warmth. At some point I must have dozed off, because I woke to the sound of the telephone ringing. The clock read 9:11 p.m. The sound was shrill in the quiet. Mrs. Brooks? A male voice said when I answered. This is Tom Reynolds from the bank. I'm sorry to call so late, but we wanted to verify that your accounts have been consolidated per your daughter's request. My daughter's? What? Angela Sinclair. She provided authorization forms with your joint signature. Standard procedure during asset consolidation after property sales. My stomach turned cold. Mr. Reynolds, I said, my voice trembling, what if I never signed such a request? A pause. Paper rustled on his end. Our records show your signature on file, ma'am. Dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Before she even brought me the blue folder. My knees nearly buckled. I understand, I managed to whisper. Thank you for calling. After I hung up, I stared at the receiver until the dial tone dissolved into static. I walked to the window. Outside, the ocean stretched black and endless, its waves glinting under a thin line of moonlight. Somewhere deep in that rhythm, I thought I heard Robert's voice again, calm, steady, impossible. Don't let fear make you small, Annie. Fear makes you blind. I pressed my palm against the glass. The night air beyond was colder than I remembered. The next morning, I walked to town. The bank teller confirmed what I already knew. The accounts were empty, every penny gone. When I returned home, I found a single white envelope slipped beneath the door. It was postmarked from New York. Inside was a note written in Angela's handwriting, elegant, detached. Mom, don't panic, everything's fine. Edward and I just need to handle some things overseas. I'll explain when we're back. Take care of yourself. No address, no phone number. I sank to the floor. The letter crumpled in my hand, tears finally spilling after days of restraint. The sea murmured beyond the window like it pitied me. That night I made a promise to Robert, to myself, maybe even to her. If she thought she'd taken everything from me, she was wrong. It was only a week later when the whispers began. Small-town voices travel faster than tides, and by the time I went to the grocery store on a Tuesday morning, my story had already become everyone else's entertainment. The cashier, young, polite, with a nervous smile, couldn't meet my eyes when she rang up my bread and tea. Behind me in line, 2 women spoke just loud enough to be heard. She sold the house to her daughter, you know. Practically gave it away. Imagine, 71, and still doesn't know how to handle her money. Poor thing. Poor? Not anymore. Word is, the daughter cleared out everything, left her with nothing but her pension. Their laughter was soft, but it landed like stones. I pretended not to hear, but my hands shook when I reached for my wallet. The bills inside were crisp, yet the act of paying for groceries felt like exposing a wound. I thanked the cashier, forcing a smile, and left with my paper bag hugging my chest like armor. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and salt. The sky stretched low and heavy. I walked the few blocks home slowly, past the post office, the library, the little bakery where Robert used to buy lemon muffins every Sunday. People nodded as I passed, but their smiles carried pity thin, brittle pity that made me feel smaller than I'd ever been. That afternoon, a letter came from Shoreline Realty, inviting me to a neighborhood appreciation luncheon. I almost threw it away, but something about the handwritten signature at the bottom caught my eye. Angela Sinclair, Regional Partner. Regional Partner. She'd used her married name, the one she'd never liked. It was strange seeing it printed on glossy paper beneath the logo of the same firm that had taken photos of my porch just days earlier. The luncheon was scheduled for Saturday at the Bayside Community Center, the same hall where Robert's memorial had been held 7 years before. My stomach turned at the thought, but something inside me said to go. Maybe I needed to see her face, or at least the people who helped her strip me bare. When Saturday came, I put on my navy dress, the one Robert loved, the one that made my silver hair look softer. The hall was full of chatter and clinking glasses, the air thick with the smell of seafood and perfume. I felt out of place among the polished smiles and catered trays, but I held my head high. I spotted Angela across the room almost immediately. She stood under the banner, celebrating successful closings, like a hostess at her own coronation. Her dress was a pale ivory that shimmered under the lights, her hair pinned in a sleek bun. She looked radiant, powerful, and nothing like the daughter who once begged me to braid her hair before piano recitals. "Mom," she said when she noticed me, her smile tight, surprised. "You came." "I did," I said calmly. "You didn't mention you were the one being celebrated." Her eyes flickered. "Well, yes. Edward and I closed several major deals this quarter. It's a big step for us." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You look lovely, but maybe you shouldn't bring up family things here, okay? It's a professional event." Professional. I almost laughed. Before I could respond, a man with a microphone clinked his glass and called for attention. "Let's raise a toast," he said, "to the woman who made it all possible, our top agent, Angela Sinclair, whose family legacy on Ocean Crest Drive has inspired us all." Applause broke out around the room. My throat closed. Family legacy. The words echoed, cruel and absurd. Angela glanced at me briefly, her smile faltering, then recovering. "Thank you," she said to the crowd. "My mother taught me everything about hard work and sacrifice. This home, our home, represents years of love and perseverance. I couldn't be prouder." The applause grew louder, but I heard only the blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to shout to tell them that this celebration was built on deceit, that the woman they were clapping for had taken everything from her own mother. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. Instead, I set my glass down quietly on the nearest table. A few people turned to look at me, curiosity mixed with recognition. Someone whispered my name. Angela's smile stiffened. "Mom," she hissed under her breath. "Don't make a scene." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was flawless, her confidence practiced. But behind the shimmer in her eyes, I saw something else, a flicker of fear perhaps, or shame she hadn't learned to name. I leaned in just enough for her to hear me. "You already made it," I said softly. "I'm just standing in the ruins." Then I turned and walked out. The sea air hit me like a baptism, cold, sharp, cleansing. Behind me, the music and laughter spilled from the open doors, chasing me down the steps but never quite catching up. I walked until I reached the boardwalk, until the lights of the town faded, and only the sound of the tide remained. There I let the tears come, the kind that shake you from the inside out. For the first time, I wasn't crying for what I'd lost, but for what she'd become. The wind lifted the hem of my dress and wrapped it around my legs like a shroud. The moon broke through the clouds, a pale coin of light over the waves. Somewhere out there, I thought, Robert was watching, and I promised him silently I wouldn't let this humiliation be the end of me. The morning after that humiliating luncheon, I woke to a house that no longer felt like mine. The air was heavy, as though the walls themselves pitied me. I made coffee, but it tasted bitter, metallic, and the silence pressed against my ears. When I looked out toward the sea, fog hung thick over the water, erasing the horizon. For the first time, I couldn't tell where the ocean ended and the sky began. I sat by the kitchen table staring at nothing until the doorbell rang. The sound startled me. Hardly anyone came by anymore, not since word had spread about what Angela had done. When I opened the door, no one stood there. Only a small envelope lay on the doormat, damp from the morning mist. The paper was thick, old-fashioned, sealed with wax. My name was written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years, curved, deliberate, and deeply familiar. Antonia. For a long moment, I just held it, afraid to open it. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter on cream stationery and a smaller envelope tucked behind it. The first line nearly took my breath away. If you are reading this, Annie, it means I'm gone and you're still in that house by the sea. Good, that's where you belong. It was Robert's handwriting. I felt my heart lurch. The words blurred for a second as tears gathered. I pressed my hand to my chest, forcing myself to read. You always worried about the future, about whether we'd have enough. I didn't tell you everything back then, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to live simply, without worry. But I made some investments over the years, quiet ones. The bus driving paid the bills, but the rest, well, that was our safety net. For you, for her, if she ever needed it. My eyes darted to the smaller envelope. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were 2 folded deeds and a note from a law firm in Charleston, dated 5 years earlier. Properties held in trust under the name of Antonia M. Brooks. 2 addresses I didn't recognize. Both were rental properties. My mind struggled to catch up. Robert had owned more than just this house. I kept reading. I never wanted you to tell Angela about these. She doesn't understand the value of quiet money, the kind that isn't loud but lasts. I arranged for our lawyer, Mr. Holden, to handle things if you ever need help. He knows everything. Trust him but no one else. The letter ended with something that felt like both a warning and a promise. If ever the world turns against you, Annie, remember, nothing that's truly yours can be stolen. It just waits for you to claim it back. I read that line 3 times, the words burning into me. For the first time since Angela left, something inside me shifted, something small, sharp, and alive. Hope, maybe, or resolve. I sat there for hours, the letters spread open on the table beside my cold coffee. Every detail of the handwriting was Robert, the way his R's dipped low, the little flourish on the Y. I could almost hear his voice as I traced the words with my fingertip. When I finally gathered myself, I looked up Mr. Holden's office on the internet. The firm still existed. The website listed a number. I called, and a young receptionist answered. Holden and Associates, she said. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Mrs. Antonia Brooks. My late husband, Robert Brooks, may have worked with your firm. There might be a trust in my name. Of course, Mrs. Brooks, she replied. Let me check our records. Could you hold for a moment? The line filled with faint piano music. My hand shook as I held the receiver. After a few minutes, she came back. Yes, ma'am. We do have a file under that name. It's been inactive for several years, but everything is intact. Mr. Holden's retired, but Mr. Lawrence, our senior partner, can review it with you. Would you like to make an appointment? I nearly dropped the phone. Yes, I said quickly. Yes, please. Tomorrow morning at 10? That's perfect. When I hung up, I sat very still. Outside, the fog had lifted just enough to show a slice of sunlight breaking through the gray. I felt as if Robert himself had opened that sky for me. That evening, I took out his photograph from the mantel and placed it on the table beside the letter. His smile was soft, patient. You always did think ahead, I whispered. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply, without dreams. The next morning, I dressed carefully, navy skirt, pressed blouse, the pearl earrings Robert gave me for our 25th anniversary. As I stepped outside, the air was cool, sharp with salt. I locked the door, not because I needed to, but because I finally had something worth protecting again. And as I walked down the path toward town, I whispered to the wind, She thought she took everything, Robert, but you left me a way to fight. The law firm's office in Charleston was smaller than I expected. Quiet, sunlit, with the smell of lemon oil and old books. Mr. Lawrence, a kind man in his 60s, greeted me with a handshake that felt firm but not rushed. Mr. Holden spoke fondly of your husband, he said. He was a careful investor, Mrs. Brooks. Very deliberate. He guided me into a room lined with dark wood shelves. There, he opened a thick file stamped Brooks Trust in faded ink. My hands trembled as he turned the pages. Deeds, ledgers, dividend statements, decades of quiet, steady growth. Robert had been buying and reinvesting for years. There were not just 2 properties but 5, plus stocks and municipal bonds. All in my name. Your late husband protected you well, Mr. Lawrence said gently. These are yours, entirely. Nothing your daughter signed could touch these, unless you granted her power of attorney. I didn't, I said firmly. Then she has no claim. The words hit me like sunlight through fog. For the first time in months, my lungs filled fully. I exhaled slowly. So, I can access them? Of course, you'll need to sign some verification papers, but everything remains intact. When I left the office, the air felt lighter, almost fragile. I stood outside for a long while, watching the traffic hum past, feeling the weight of Robert's foresight pressing gently against my heart. He had never left me helpless. He had known somewhere deep inside that I might one day need a lifeline. As I returned home, the sky was streaked with pink and gold, the kind of evening Robert used to call a keeper. I sat by the window and let the last of the sun rest on my face. That same night, as if some invisible thread connected us, I received an email. The sender's name made my pulse jump. From Angela Sinclair. Subject: I need help. I hesitated before clicking. The message was short, sloppy, almost frantic. Mom, something's happened. Edward's gone. I don't know what to do. Please don't hate me. I'll call tomorrow. No details. No apology. Just that. I stared at the words for a long time. The bitterness I expected never came. Instead, a quiet ache spread through me, a mixture of pity and inevitability. The universe, it seemed, had a way of balancing its own scales. The next morning, the phone rang. Her voice on the other end was unrecognizable. Mom. It was small, hoarse, brittle. I'm in London. Edward disappeared. He took everything. Every cent. He said he'd book us a flight to Rome for the weekend, and then he never came back to the hotel. I said nothing. The silence on my end seemed to frighten her. I don't know what to do, she whispered. He left me with debts, forged documents. There are people looking for him, Mom. And for me, I think they think I was involved. Her words tumbled, desperate, tangled in sobs. How long? I asked quietly. What? How long did you know he wasn't who he said he was? Another pause. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't want to see it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the waves outside. He took the money? All of it, she choked out. Even the house money. There's nothing left. I have nowhere to go. For a moment, I almost laughed softly, bitterly, not out of cruelty, but at the symmetry of it all. My daughter had stolen everything from me, and now someone had stolen everything from her. Karma doesn't wait for permission, Robert used to say. Mom, Angela said again, please, I don't know who else to call. I'm scared. Her voice cracked on that last word, and something inside me broke too. No matter what she'd done, she was still my daughter. Still that little girl who once hid behind my skirt during thunderstorms. Come home, I said finally. If you can. There was a sound, a stifled sob of relief. I'll try. Thank you, Mom. I'll find a way. When I hung up, I felt the strangest mix of sorrow and strength. I went to the mantel, touched Robert's photo. You were right, I whispered. She had to fall to learn. 3 days later, a cab stopped at the end of the driveway. Through the rain-smeared window, I saw her, my Angela. Her once perfect hair hung limp, her clothes creased, eyes red from crying. She looked 10 years older. When she stepped out, her heels sank into the wet gravel. Mom, she said, voice trembling. I didn't speak. I simply stepped aside, letting her in. The moment she crossed the threshold, the house seemed to sigh like it was exhaling a memory it had been holding too long. Angela looked around. You still have the house, she murmured, disbelief flickering in her eyes. Yes, I said quietly. I do. Her lips parted, as though to ask how, but she didn't. She followed me to the kitchen, where I set a cup of tea before her. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Only the rain filled the silence, steady and cleansing. When she finally whispered, I'm sorry, I believed her. But forgiveness would not come easy. Not yet. When Angela returned home, she didn't arrive as the daughter who once swept through my doorway with confidence and designer shoes. She arrived barefoot, her luggage broken, her hair tangled by wind and rain. The taxi that brought her left quickly, as if afraid to linger too long in our driveway. She stood under the porch light, clutching her passport and a single torn handbag, her face ghost pale beneath the yellow glow. I opened the door before she could knock. The smell of the sea rushed in behind her, salt, damp wool, and a faint sweetness of lilac perfume that had turned stale somewhere across the ocean. "Mom," she whispered, "can I come in?" I studied her for a long moment. The woman who had betrayed me now looked like a lost child again, shoulders bowed, eyes wide with shame. I stepped aside without a word. Inside, she paused by the threshold as though unsure whether she still belonged here. The sound of her soft sobs filled the room like rain tapping on the window pane. "You look exhausted," I said quietly. "Sit down." She obeyed, lowering herself onto the same chair where I'd signed away my life months earlier. Her hands trembled as she held the teacup I offered her. I noticed how thin her wrists had become, how the skin beneath her eyes had turned a dull shade of gray. "I didn't think you'd open the door," she murmured. "Neither did I." Her lip quivered. "I deserve that." We sat in silence, the air between us thick with all the words we hadn't said. I could hear the old clock ticking in the hallway, slow and deliberate. After a while, she spoke again. "Edward's gone. He took everything. My accounts, my cards, even my passport at first. I had to beg the consulate for a temporary one." She rubbed her arms, as if the memory chilled her. "I slept in a hostel in London for 2 weeks, waiting for someone to call me back. No one did." I listened without interrupting. "I thought about calling you every day," she continued, "but I was afraid you'd hang up." "I almost did," I admitted. Angela gave a short, broken laugh. "I wouldn't have blamed you." Her voice carried none of the sharp edges I remembered. No confidence, no calculation, just exhaustion. "Why did you come back?" I asked. "Because there's nowhere else to go." She met my eyes then, and I saw tears welling. "And because I needed to see you, even if you hate me." I didn't answer right away. Hate was too simple a word for what lived inside me now. It was a tangle of grief, love, disappointment, and the faint, flickering instinct to protect her still. "I don't hate you," I said finally, "but I don't know who you are anymore." She flinched as if struck. The wind rattled the window, and we both looked toward it. The sky outside was bruised purple, the sea restless. Angela's reflection wavered in the glass, thin, ghost-like. She set her cup down. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just need somewhere to stay for a while. I'll find work. I'll pay rent if you want." The words rent and forgiveness fell strangely between us. I stood and walked to the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass. "You can stay," I said, still looking out at the sea. "But this isn't the same home you left. Things are different now." "I know," she whispered. That night I gave her the guest room at the end of the hall, the one that used to smell of cedar and lavender, now faintly musty from disuse. I changed the sheets myself, watching the dust swirl in the lamplight. When she lay down, she looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders curled inward like a child's. Before turning off the light, she murmured, "I don't deserve your kindness." "You're not getting kindness," I said softly. "You're getting shelter. What you deserve will depend on what you do next." Her eyes shimmered in the half-dark. "I understand." I closed the door gently behind me and leaned against it, the wood pressing cool against my back. In the hallway, the floor creaked the way it always had, as though the house itself was testing each step we took toward something fragile, perhaps reconciliation, perhaps collapse. In the kitchen, I poured myself another cup of tea and sat at the table, staring at the faint water stains left from months before. I thought of Robert's letter, of the trust in my name, of the quiet power it gave me now. I had no intention of using it to hurt her, but for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. Outside, the waves struck the shore with steady rhythm, like a reminder that everything, love, pain, betrayal, eventually comes back to where it began. I whispered into the silence, as if speaking to Robert. "She's home. Broken, but home." And in the quiet that followed, I wasn't sure whether I felt peace or the beginning of something far more complicated. The days that followed blurred together in a slow, uneasy rhythm. Angela moved through the house like a shadow, quiet and cautious, as though every creaking floorboard might accuse her. She slept late, woke without appetite, and spoke little unless spoken to. The confidence that once radiated from her had withered into timidity. Even her laughter, the high, bright sound that used to fill the kitchen, was gone. At first, I didn't know what to do with her silence. I found myself tiptoeing through my own home, afraid that even the sound of a spoon against a cup might break her apart. But gradually, life resumed its rhythm, if only because it had to. One morning, I heard the back door open just after dawn. I followed the sound and saw her in the garden, standing barefoot on the dew-soaked grass. She was trying to pull weeds from the flower bed, her fingers raw and trembling. "You don't have to do that," I said from the doorway. "I know," she answered without looking up. "I just need to do something." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I let her be. Later that day, I found her sitting on the couch with a stack of old envelopes spread out before her Robert's letters. She looked up when I entered, eyes wet. "I didn't know he wrote to you like this," she said softly. "He sounds so steady. I never realized how much he thought about everything." I took a seat beside her. "Your father was never a man of many words, but when he wrote, he told the truth." She nodded, fingers tracing the looping letters. "I wish I'd known him better." "You did," I said. "You just didn't listen." Her shoulders tensed, then slumped. "I was awful to you," she whispered. I kept telling myself it was business, that I was protecting what was mine. But when Edward started talking about investments, I wanted to believe him. He made me feel like we were building something real. "And you built it on sand," I said quietly. Her lips pressed together, trembling. "He told me you were old-fashioned, that you didn't understand how the world worked. I let him make me think you were holding me back." I watched her for a moment, torn between pity and anger. "Did you ever think," I asked, "that I might have given everything anyway, if you had just asked?" Angela covered her face with her hands. "I didn't deserve that kind of love," she said, voice muffled. "No one deserves love," I replied softly. "That's why it matters." The silence that followed wasn't hostile this time. It was heavy, yes, but also human. That evening, I noticed her cleaning the kitchen without being asked. She wiped the counters, scrubbed the sink, even straightened the old clock on the wall that had hung crooked for months. When she finished, she turned to me. "I applied for a job," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "At the diner in town. They need someone to work the night shift cleaning mostly. It's not glamorous, but—" She hesitated. "I can't live here for free, Mom." I wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that she could take her time to rest, but something in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't pride, it was the beginning of something I hadn't seen in her for years. Humility. "That's good," I said finally. "Work is honest. It'll give you back your footing." She nodded. "I'll start tomorrow." That night, after she went to bed, I stood in the hallway outside her room for a long time, listening to her breathing through the door. There was a strange comfort in it, a fragile reminder of the years before everything broke. In the quiet, I whispered, "Let her learn, Robert. Let her rebuild from the ground she burned." Over the next few weeks, I watched her transform, slowly, painfully. She would leave at 6 each evening, dressed in plain clothes, her hair tied back, returning near dawn with the faint smell of bleach and coffee clinging to her. Her hands became rough again, the manicured polish long gone. Sometimes I'd find her asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on folded arms, exhaustion etched deep into her face. One morning, I woke to find a note by the coffee maker in her handwriting. "Bought groceries, paid electric bill, hope that's okay." It wasn't much, but it was something. Still, there were moments when I caught her staring out toward the ocean, eyes distant, as if she were trying to calculate the cost of everything she'd lost. One night, when she returned from work, I left a cup of tea waiting for her. She looked surprised. "You stayed up?" "I don't sleep much anymore," I said, smiling faintly. "Old habits." She sat down, cupping the mug in her hands. "It's strange," she said, "working there. People barely look at me. I used to walk into rooms and everyone noticed. Now I scrub their tables." "How does that feel?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "Right. she said finally. It feels right. I studied her face under the yellow kitchen light, the faint scars of pride slowly fading. Then maybe you're finally finding yourself again. She smiled, a small, fragile curve of her lips, but it was real. That night, after she went to bed, I looked at Robert's photograph and whispered, "You'd be proud of her, not for what she was, but for what she's becoming." Still, in the quiet that followed, a thought crept in, dark and hesitant. Could a broken trust ever truly heal? Or was forgiveness just another kind of illusion we told ourselves to keep breathing? It was a Thursday night when everything between us cracked open, the kind of night when the wind howled through the shutters and the house seemed to breathe alongside the tide. I'd stayed up late again, half reading one of Robert's old novels, when I heard the faint creak of the front door. The clock read 12:47 a.m. Angela was home early from her shift. I expected to hear the quiet shuffle of her shoes on the floor, the soft clatter of her mug in the sink, but instead, there was silence. Then a sound I hadn't heard from her in years, a muffled sob. I set the book down and walked to the kitchen. She was standing by the window, still in her diner uniform, shoulders trembling, hands gripping the counter as if she were trying to hold herself together. "Angela," I said gently, "what's happened?" She turned slowly. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks, her eyes swollen. "I can't," her voice broke. "I can't keep pretending it didn't happen. I can't walk into this house every day and act like it's normal." I moved closer but didn't touch her. "Then don't pretend, say it." Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, she whispered, "I stole from you." The confession fell between us like shattered glass. "I know," I said quietly. She blinked, stunned. "You know?" "I've always known." I pulled out a chair and sat, my knees suddenly weak. "You think a mother can't tell when her own child is lying?" I didn't want to see it then, but I knew. She sank to the floor, tears spilling freely now. "I told myself it was business," she said, voice breaking. "Edward said we could double the money in 6 months. He said you didn't need it, that it was time you gave something back. I told myself I was helping you. I convinced myself you were too old to understand. But I knew what I was doing, Mom. I knew." Her words came in waves, raw and trembling. "I watched you sign those papers," she said, "and I told myself it was fine, that you trusted me, so it couldn't be wrong. I kept thinking about the life I wanted, the house in London, the vacations, the dinners, and when Edward said we'd finally be free, I believed him." She pressed her palms against her face, shaking. "And when he took it all, when I woke up in that empty hotel room, I realized he hadn't just taken the money, he'd taken everything I was, and I deserved it." The wind outside rattled the window pane, like the house itself was shivering with us. I knelt beside her, lowering myself slowly until our faces were level. Her tears had left pale tracks down her cheeks. I hadn't been this close to her in years. "I wanted to hate you," I said softly. "Every time I looked at your face in a photograph, I told myself I did. But when I imagined you lost somewhere far from home, I couldn't hold on to it. Anger doesn't last when it's born from love." She looked at me, eyes wide, searching. "How can you even look at me after what I did?" "Because I'm your mother." My voice trembled, but I held her gaze. "And because I've made mistakes, 2 different ones, but mistakes all the same." She frowned, confused. "You? What mistakes could you have made?" I let out a breath that tasted like old regret. "When you were younger, I thought protecting you meant saying yes to everything. I gave you more than I should have, even when it hurt. I wanted your life to be easier than mine, so I never let you learn how to fail. Maybe I built the kind of love that doesn't teach respect." Angela wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "You don't have to take the blame, Mom." "I'm not," I said, "but I understand how we got here." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ocean, rising and falling like it had been waiting for this silence all along. Finally, she whispered, "What happens now?" I stood and offered her my hand. "Now, you live with what you did and you earn your way back." She hesitated, then took my hand, gripping it tightly. "I will," she said, voice trembling but sure. "I swear I will." We stood there for a long time, mother and daughter, 2 broken halves of something that had once been whole. The house seemed to breathe easier, as if the confession had loosened the tension buried in its walls. When she finally went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen. unable to move. I looked out toward the moonlit ocean and whispered, "You were right again, Robert. The hardest forgiveness is the one that still loves after knowing the truth." But even as I said it, I knew forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. Some wounds heal, but the scars stay as reminders sharp enough to hurt when the light catches them just right. 2 weeks passed after Angela's confession, and though the house began to breathe again, its silence still carried a strange kind of weight, like something unfinished, waiting to surface. We spoke more now, but carefully, as if every word might disturb the fragile peace we'd built. She kept working at the diner, coming home with sore feet and hands that smelled faintly of bleach, while I spent my days in the garden, coaxing new life from the soil that had gone dry in her absence. Then, one morning, a knock came at the door. It was soft, polite, too polite, to be one of the neighbors. When I opened it, a man stood there in a charcoal suit, holding a leather briefcase. He was in his 50s, maybe older, with silver hair and kind eyes. "Mrs. Brooks?" he asked. "Yes? My name's Peter Lawson. I'm an associate from Holden & Associates. I work with Mr. Lawrence." I felt my heart tighten. "Of course, please come in." He stepped inside, glancing around the living room with professional calm. "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but there's a matter concerning your trust that requires a signature in person. We sent a letter last week, but it may not have reached you yet." I motioned him to the table where sunlight poured through the lace curtains. He set down his briefcase, unlatched it, and carefully pulled out a folder. Angela, hearing voices, appeared in the doorway. Her hair was damp from a shower, her expression cautious. "Who is it, Mom?" "This is Mr. Lawson," I said evenly. "He's from the law firm your father worked with." The moment she heard father, her face paled slightly. She stepped closer, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Mr. Lawson adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. "Mr. Holden originally set up a series of assets under your late husband's name, Robert Brooks. These were transferred to you, Mrs. Brooks, as the sole beneficiary. There's a new dividend release that needs your acknowledgement." Angela blinked. "Assets?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, ma'am. A series of income-generating properties and stocks. They've performed quite well, actually." Angela's eyes widened. I thought—" She stopped herself, looking between us. "Mom, I thought you said there was nothing left." I looked at her calmly. "That's what you thought." Mr. Lawson cleared his throat politely, as if sensing the conversation beneath the words. "If you'd prefer privacy, Mrs. Brooks, I can step outside while you review these." "That's not necessary," I said, my gaze still fixed on my daughter. "Please continue." He handed me the documents and explained the figures: rental properties, investment returns, a modest but steady income. I listened, though my focus wasn't on the numbers. It was on Angela, who stood frozen, her hand covering her mouth as the truth sank in. When he finished, I signed where he indicated, thanked him for his time, and saw him to the door. Once it closed behind him, the silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Angela turned toward me slowly. "You knew," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You knew this whole time." I nodded. "I found your father's letter, the one he left for me. He protected more than you ever imagined." Her eyes shimmered with disbelief. "So, you still had money, property, everything?" "Not everything," I said quietly, "but enough." She sank into a chair, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" I leaned on the table, meeting her gaze. "Because you needed to understand what it meant to lose something first. If I had told you the day you came back, you would have thought it was a reward. This," I gestured toward the window where the sunlight spilled over the waves, "this is your lesson, not your punishment." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't deserve your mercy." "I'm not giving you mercy," I said. "I'm giving you a chance to start over. There's a difference." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "All this time I thought you were surviving on nothing. I thought I'd destroyed you." "You did destroy me," I said softly. "But you didn't finish me." That made her look up, startled. I continued, my voice calm but firm. "Robert didn't raise me to crumble. He raised me to endure. And he raised you to know better, though somewhere along the way you forgot. Now you'll remember." She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing down her cheek. I went to the cabinet and retrieved the letter Robert had written, the one that had changed everything. I placed it gently in front of her. "Read it," I said. "Every word. You'll understand him better than you ever did when he was alive." She unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Her lips moved silently as she read, and by the time she reached the end, tears streamed down her face. "He was still taking care of us," she whispered, "even after everything." I touched her hand. "That's what love does. It doesn't stop because it's betrayed. It pauses, and it waits to be remembered." She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. The ocean roared outside, filling the silence with its endless rhythm. That night, long after she'd gone to bed, I sat by the window, staring at the waves under a crescent moon. I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. The kind that comes when the truth finally stands in daylight. Robert's words echoed in my mind. "Nothing that's truly yours can be stolen." He was right. The next morning dawned soft and gray, the kind of morning where fog blurred the line between ocean and sky. I was in the kitchen whisking eggs when I heard Angela's footsteps approach, slow, hesitant, as if she wasn't sure she belonged in that sound of morning routine. She sat at the table without a word. Her eyes were red, her face pale, but her posture carried something I hadn't seen in years: humility. "I didn't sleep," she said quietly. "I didn't expect you to." I poured the eggs into the pan, the sizzle filling the silence. "Did you finish reading his letter?" She nodded. "Twice." Then, after a pause, "He was smarter than any of us gave him credit for." I smiled faintly. Robert always had a way of hiding wisdom behind simple things. Angela clasped her hands on the table. "Mom, I need to tell you something else." The tone in her voice stopped me mid-stir. I turned, spatula in hand. Her eyes were fixed on the wood grain of the table. "When I sold the house," she began, "Edward didn't just convince me it was my idea. He said it was reckless, but I pushed him. I told him I deserved more, that I'd spent my life in your shadow, that everything we had should belong to me eventually. I said those words, Mom. I said them out loud." Her confession struck like cold water. I didn't interrupt. "I wanted control," she continued, voice trembling. "Over the house, the money, even you. I told myself it was for your good, but really it was pride. When he hesitated, I told him if he didn't help me, I'd find someone who would. So he did. He forged things, signatures, transfers, but I knew, and I let him." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "And the night he left me in London, I realized I'd become everything I used to despise. I'd turned into the kind of person who trades love for convenience." I turned off the stove and sat across from her. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the low crash of waves beyond the walls. "You're not the first person to ruin what they love," I said finally. "But you might be one of the few who's had to live long enough to see it clearly." She looked up at me, startled. "You're not angry?" "I was," I admitted. "For months I let anger eat at me until there was nothing left but bitterness. But anger's like seawater, it keeps you afloat for a while, but drink too much and it poisons you. So I stopped." She swallowed hard. "Then why didn't you tell me about the trust earlier? You could have humiliated me. You could have taken revenge." I held her gaze. "Because revenge only teaches fear. I wanted you to learn remorse." Her eyes filled again. "I did," I nodded. "Then maybe you've learned enough." But before I could stand, Angela's face changed, her expression tightening with a sudden thought. "Wait," she said, voice trembling. "There's something else you don't know." She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "This came for you last month, before I came back. It was sent to my old address by mistake. I didn't open it until after everything happened." She handed it to me. The paper was thin, the edges worn. I unfolded it carefully. Inside was a typed letter from a law firm in New York. To Mrs. Antonia Brooks. Estate of Robert Brooks. Please be advised that additional assets belonging to the late Mr. Brooks were identified following a recent audit. The holdings include minority shares in several transportation companies held under a secondary trust. These assets are registered under the joint beneficiaries, Antonia Brooks and Angela Sinclair. I read it twice before looking up. "Joint beneficiaries," I murmured. Angela's voice shook. "He left something for me, too." The truth sank between us like a sudden gust of wind. Robert hadn't just planned for me. He had planned for both of us. Even after everything, he'd made sure she had a share. Angela covered her face with her hands. "He believed in me," she whispered. "After all I did, he still believed in me." I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes. "He must have known you'd need redemption more than money." She dropped her hands, her expression breaking open, raw, human. "I don't deserve it." "Then earn it," I said simply. "Turn what's left into something better than what you took." She reached across the table, hesitant, her fingers brushing mine. I didn't pull away. For the first time, her touch didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like surrender. We sat there as the first light of morning slid across the kitchen floor, turning everything gold and new. It was the same room where she'd once tricked me into signing away my life, and now it had become the place where she'd returned what was left of her soul. Still, as I looked at her, another thought crept in, quiet and cold. If Robert had planned this much ahead, what else had he hidden? What else was waiting to be uncovered? And though peace had finally found its way into the room, a whisper of uncertainty still lingered in the air, like the tide drawing back before another wave. The following days blurred into something fragile and strange, too quiet to be called peace, too raw to be called healing. Angela tried to fill the house with motion, cooking breakfast, folding laundry, sweeping the porch, as if domestic rhythm could erase the years that had gone wrong. But even in her efforts, there was tension in the air, a heaviness that hung between us, unspoken but alive. It came undone on a Sunday evening. The sky was the color of copper before rain. I was setting the table for dinner when Angela walked in from the porch, holding Robert's letter in both hands. She'd been rereading it every night, and tonight her face was blotched with tears. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "do you think he'd forgive me? If he were here?" I looked up, meeting her eyes. "Your father didn't believe in forgiveness as a word," I said. "He believed in proof, in change." She sank into a chair, clutching the letter to her chest. "I keep seeing his face every time I close my eyes. I thought I could live with what I did if I just worked hard enough, but I can't. It doesn't go away." Her confession was raw, desperate. I set the dishes down carefully and sat across from her. "You can't erase what's been done, Angela, but you can stop living inside it." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. Every time I walk through this house, I remember you sitting at that table with the pen in your hand. I hear my voice telling you to sign. I see the way you looked at me, and I want to tear that version of me out of my skin." Her shoulders began to shake. "I keep dreaming that Dad is still here. He doesn't speak. He just drives his bus past the house. I run after him, but he never stops. He never looks back." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "That's not punishment, sweetheart. That's guilt reminding you what you lost. It's how your soul learns to stay awake." Angela's tears came faster. "I don't deserve to stay here," she whispered. "I don't deserve to call you my mother." My throat tightened. "Don't say that." "It's true. I hurt you more than anyone ever could. I took everything from you and you still let me come back. Why?" I swallowed hard. "Because hate would have killed me faster than what you did. And because somewhere in all that ugliness, I still saw my little girl. The one who used to hide under the table when it thundered." Her sobs broke open, ragged and unrestrained. I stood, moving around the table, and knelt beside her. She buried her face in my shoulder, shaking like a child. I felt the hot sting of her tears through my blouse, but I didn't move. I let her cry because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, it just needs time to breathe. "I can't fix it," she said between gasps. "No matter what I do, it'll never undo what I've done." "No," I said softly. "But maybe that's not what redemption is. Maybe it's learning to live with the ruin and build something out of it anyway." She clung tighter. "You're too kind, Mom. You shouldn't be." "Kindness isn't weakness," I murmured. "It's armor. And one day, you'll wear it too." Outside, the wind picked up. A storm was rolling in the kind Robert used to call an ocean's memory. Thunder rumbled low, and the smell of salt and rain seeped through the open window. Angela's breathing slowed. She pulled away slightly, eyes red, her face streaked with tears. "I want to do something good with what Dad left us," she said. "Not just to make it right, but to make it matter." I nodded. "Then we'll find a way." Lightning flashed across the horizon, a white fracture cutting through the dark sky. For a moment, it illuminated her face, and I saw it clearly then, the girl she once was, hidden beneath the woman she'd become. The first drops of rain tapped against the windows, soft at first, then harder, until it sounded like the sea itself was falling from the sky. I stood and closed the window. "Get some rest," I told her. "Tomorrow we'll talk about what's next." She nodded, exhausted, and disappeared down the hallway. When the house grew quiet again, I turned off the lights and sat alone in the living room. The thunder rolled closer, shaking the windows. I stared at the framed photo of Robert above the mantel, his smile steady, knowing. "I kept your promise," I whispered. "She's learning." But as the storm raged outside, I felt the tremor of my own breaking point. My chest tightened with something sharp. Grief, relief, love, and exhaustion all tangled together. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I realized they'd started. Because even as she cried in my arms, I knew something she didn't. Love could forgive, but it could never forget. And some parts of me would remain broken, no matter how many apologies filled the air. The thunder faded slowly, rolling out toward the horizon. I wiped my tears and whispered into the dark, "Robert, I hope you can see us. We're still trying." The storm passed by dawn, leaving the air washed clean and the sky pale as linen. The gulls returned first, crying above the wet sand, and the sea, after its night of fury, rolled back into its familiar rhythm. The house smelled of rain and coffee when I woke. Angela was already in the kitchen, barefoot, her hair tied up messily, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She was frying eggs the way Robert used to, with too much butter and not enough patience. "I didn't want to wake you," she said softly when she saw me. "You didn't," I answered, settling into the chair by the window. "The storm did that for you." She smiled faintly, and for a heartbeat I saw the girl who once burned toast every Saturday morning. But there was something else in her now quiet steadiness, a humility I'd thought she was incapable of. We ate in silence. The world outside seemed gentler. Rainwater still clung to the windows, refracting light into thin prisms across the table. After breakfast, she began cleaning up, moving with slow, deliberate grace. "Mom," she said suddenly, "I've been thinking about the money the trust Dad left, the part that's in both our names." I waited. "I want to give my share back to you," she continued. "Everything. I don't want it." I shook my head. "That's not what he wanted." "But I don't deserve it," she insisted. "You earned peace. I earned shame." I folded my hands. "And what will you do if you give it away? Punish yourself for the rest of your life? That's not redemption, Angela. That's surrender." Her shoulders dropped. "Then what should I do?" "Use it," I said. "Not for yourself, for others, for women who've been where I've been, who trusted the wrong people, who lost everything and had to rebuild from ashes." She blinked, surprised. "You mean, like a fund?" I nodded slowly. "A foundation. Something small, local. Something that says our mistakes didn't end us." Her eyes shimmered. "Would you do it with me?" "If we do it," I said, "we do it as equals, not as penance, as purpose." She bit her lip and nodded. "Then let's do it." That afternoon we drove into town to meet with Mr. Lawson. The sun had broken through by then, casting long silver streaks across the highway. I hadn't driven that far in months, but the motion felt liberating wind in my hair, the steady hum of tires on wet pavement. Angela sat beside me, quiet, watching the coastline pass by like she was seeing it for the first time. At the law office, we explained our idea, a small trust to support widows, single mothers, women who'd lost homes or been cheated out of what they'd earned. "Mr. Levin." Lawson listened with patient eyes and nodded approvingly. "That," he said, "is the kind of legacy your husband would have been proud of." For the first time in years, Angela and I shared a look that wasn't laced with tension. It was understanding, fragile but real. When we came home that evening, the sky glowed with the soft gold of early autumn. The sea was calm again, and the air smelled of salt and hope. Angela walked down to the shore, her shoes in her hand, the hem of her jeans brushing the foam. I watched from the porch as she bent to pick up a shell, small and white, and held it against her heart. Something in that gesture, simple, wordless, told me she was finally learning what all her money and ambition had never taught her: how to be still. I stayed on the porch long after she came back inside. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of pink and violet bleeding across the sky. Robert's photo hung in the window, his smile catching the last light. "We did it, you know," I whispered. "Not perfectly, but we made it this far." For the first time in months, the house didn't feel empty, it felt alive. There was laughter again, tentative, quiet, but real. That night, I dreamed of Robert. He was sitting on his old bus, the driver's cap tilted back, looking at me through the open window. "Told you, Annie," he said with that half-smile of his. "You'd find your way." Then he drove off into the dawn, the sound of the engine fading like a heartbeat easing to rest. I woke with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't from pain. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with trumpets or miracles. It comes quietly, in the steady rhythm of two people learning to exist again without bitterness. I looked toward Angela's door. The faint sound of her breathing reached me, even, calm. She was home not as the woman who took, but as the woman who stayed. And I realized then that healing isn't a return to what was, it's the beginning of something entirely new. The days that followed were quieter, slower, like the house itself had finally learned how to breathe again. The sea outside my window was calm, its rhythm steady and familiar, like the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Every morning I woke before Angela, brewed 2 cups of coffee, and stood by the window as the horizon blushed into light. The routine was simple, peaceful. It felt almost undeserved. Angela found work at the local library, part-time, shelving books and managing the small reading club for retirees. She came home smelling of paper and dust, with stories about the people she met, an old fisherman who loved poetry, a widow who still wrote letters to her late husband every Thursday. Each time she spoke, there was a tenderness in her voice that hadn't been there before. Our days fell into rhythm, quiet meals, shared chores, the occasional walk by the beach at dusk. There were still moments when her guilt surfaced, small hesitations, half-finished apologies, but I no longer stopped her. Some guilt, I'd learned, must be carried quietly. It keeps humility alive. One afternoon we sat together in the garden, pruning the rosebush Robert had planted the year before he died. The scent of the blooms filled the air, soft, clean, almost medicinal. Angela wiped her brow and looked up at me. "Mom," she said carefully, "I keep thinking about Dad's letter, about what he said. Nothing that's truly yours can be stolen. Do you really believe that?" I took off my gloves and brushed the soil from my hands. "I do," I said, "but sometimes it takes a lifetime to understand what's truly yours." She frowned. "And what about you? What's truly yours now?" I looked toward the ocean, where the light shifted silver over the waves. "You," I said simply. "Even after everything, you're still mine. Not because I own you, but because love doesn't return itself. It stays, even when it's wounded." Angela's eyes glistened. "I don't deserve that." "Then spend the rest of your life deserving it," I said. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist, smudging dirt across her cheek. The wind caught her hair, and for the briefest moment, she looked exactly like she did when she was 16, defiant, radiant, alive. That night, I sat at the table long after she'd gone to bed. The lamp cast a soft halo of light over the papers spread before me, the official documents for our new foundation, the Brooks Fund for Women's Renewal. The ink was dry now, the seal embossed. I ran my fingers over the raised letters, feeling their weight. I thought about the long road that had brought us here, betrayal, loss, discovery, forgiveness. None of it neat, none of it simple. And somewhere in that mess, we'd found the shape of something real. The clock struck 11. Outside, the moonlight spilled across the ocean like liquid glass. I stood and opened the door, letting the night air fill the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt Robert's presence not as memory, but as something alive and near. The air smelled faintly of salt and diesel, the way it did when he came home from driving the late route. "Are you watching us?" I whispered into the dark. "We're doing the best we can." The sea answered in its way, soft waves rolling, endless and unjudging. Behind me, Angela's footsteps padded down the hallway. "Mom?" she called sleepily. "You're still up?" "I'm just thinking," I said, turning to her. "Go back to bed." She smiled faintly. "You should sleep too." "I will," I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. She hesitated, then stepped closer and kissed my cheek. It was a gentle, tentative kiss, the kind a child gives when she's still afraid of breaking what's fragile. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night, sweetheart." When she disappeared down the hall, I stood at the open doorway a moment longer. The tide was coming in again, washing the shore clean. Maybe nothing ever truly heals. Maybe some cracks remain, reminders of what it cost to learn tenderness again. But in that quiet moment, watching the waves reclaim the sand, I understood something simple and cruel and beautiful. Forgiveness isn't the end of a story, it's what keeps it going. And as the wind moved through the house, I heard Robert's voice again, faint but sure, as if carried on the tide. "You did good, Annie," I smiled, whispering back into the night. "We're still trying." Then I closed the door, turned off the light, and let the sea sing us to sleep.